Hi, and welcome everyone to Whole Soul School and Foundation's Fireside Chats for June and July 2021, as time seems to have sped up on us and we are still trying to catch up with ourselves and summertime here in the USA amidst continued changes in all of our everyday lives and our world globally. I'm Marie Mohler, and I'm an author, intuitive life coach, and a co-host of this Fireside Chats podcast series, and I am here today with Lacy Frazer, my fellow co-host, who is a clinical psychologist by training and a practicing life coach and consciousness educator today. So I first want to welcome our listeners. Here at Whole Soul School and Foundation, our mission is to increase self-awareness, personal empowerment, conscious communication, transformation, and freedom in people worldwide through our Good Vibes broadcasting and consciousness teachings. We hold a core belief that conversations are the education, and we invite listeners to visit our store at bonfire.com, where your purchases help to inspire you and those you gift these items to, as well as helping to support us to bring more messages to the people who are seeking them and needing them the most. So please check out our apparel there and have fun shopping to support our mission and the work we do here. We deeply appreciate all of your support. And without further ado, I want to welcome everybody, and I want to welcome you, Lacy.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
It is good to be back together. It's July 2021, and I just want to spotlight a few more things that as we are nearing the middle of July 2021. And of course, we want to be talking more about the rising hero's journey, because that is what we focus on here at Fireside Chats. And in this conversation today, I wanted to hone in and spotlight with you, Lacy, some information about the refusal of the call. It's a critical step in the hero's journey, one a lot of people don't necessarily know much about, right? I think it's an important step to recognize its aspects so that we can see when it is showing up in our lives, and then we can better move through it when we're more empowered with that understanding. So I thought we could recap a little bit that what that particular stage is, Lacy. I thought you could lead us a little bit into that, because if we can recognize this stage, basically, that as we talk about it more today, Lacy, that it's not a mistake when it happens, the refusal of the call. It's actually perfectly in like lockstep with the stages of the hero's journey. And when we can recognize what it is, we can, that it truly is a core part of the journey, we can open our vision a little bit wider to see the truth of this and the gifts that it holds for us if we will persevere and if we will grow through it.
Yeah, absolutely, Marie. And you know me, I tend to really love to put things into context. So if you're just listening to us for the first time, we have been talking about something that is important, I think, to every human being on the earth, which is this concept of the hero's journey. We refer to it as the rising hero within, because we're all about personal empowerment in our own lives. And when we can really connect and view ourselves as a hero in our own lives, we are empowered to make better choices. We are empowered to move forward towards our goals. So that's the larger conversation. Joseph Campbell, and we have references in several other podcasts, so I would certainly ask our listeners to go back and have a listen. But we are basing these conversations a lot off of the hero's journey as described by the philosopher and mythologist Joseph Campbell. And so we had a podcast a couple months ago about the overall hero's journey and the stages that we all go through. The hero's journey can simply be called our life. And the hero's journey can also be very sort of acute situations in our life when we are faced with challenges that we have to decide whether or not we're going to accept and move through and learn from. So there's kind of a micro lens and a macro lens to the hero's journey. The next month, we talked about the first stage called the ordinary world, and the second stage, the call to adventure, right? So just as a matter of review, I'm going to take 30 seconds to just remind our listeners that the hero's journey is about all of us. And the first stage is sort of when we are living in our ordinary world and we know that something's not quite right. We know we feel somewhat uncomfortable and we feel sort of misaligned with our life, but we're not sure what's going on. And at the same time, we're also comfortable in our life, right? And then we start to have an acute awareness or an increased awareness that there's a problem and that there is a chance for change or movement towards something new, right? And that's kind of this call, this rising feeling within ourselves that it's time for a change, or I need to change, or I know I need to change, but I'm not sure I can. Or I know I need to face this situation, but I don't know how, and I might be too scared to, right? But we've got this pull, this call to solve a problem or move forward in our life. And that's the second stage, the call to adventure. And interestingly, in Joseph Campbell's sort of model of the hero's journey, he actually takes a 180 when it comes to this third stage or phase of the hero's journey, which is what we're really going to...
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a whole lot of momentum in all of that feeling called to change. We're acknowledging to ourselves that something's summoning us to some kind of shift or some new task or new way of being, whatever that change is. And you're right, there is this in steps, this, emerges into our life, this 180, which we can think is out of place, or we've done something wrong, or we begin to doubt ourselves,
I
which
think it's important to just say that the 180 is that, like you said, there's all this momentum going forward, but stage 3 is something he calls refusal of the call.
Right.
Okay. And that's the 180. So we're moving forward. We're seeing a problem that we need to face. We're being called forward in a new direction towards change. And then, boom, all of a sudden we kind of stop in our tracks and we say, oh, I'm not going to do that. Oh, that's not for me. I can't do that. And really, he talks about all of us needing to go through this particular phase, the refusal of the call, saying really it's about reluctance or resistance to change, right? It's the hesitation, the fear, the ambivalence that we may feel and often feel right before we're about to make a change.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And I think it's some people, have written about this and said, well, why did Campbell include this stage at all? I mean, in the end, we know the hero is going to move forward. We know something's going to happen here because we can think of all the different, whether we're talking about Frodo, right? Or we're talking about Harry Potter, or we're talking about Simba and the Lion King, there are all of these heroes, but they must go through this stage. And we as humans must go through this stage. It's a really important stage to accept and allow. And that's what I really want to talk about today.
Well, thank you, because you did such a good job of recapping that and, setting up our conversation for this. And as you were talking, I was feeling, we talk a lot about the rising hero within, but what is the rising? And in the refusal of the call, it's part of the rising tension.
Yes.
That is part of the rising action, because there is this, it's this next step in the journey where we have to face deeper aspects, perhaps the shadow aspects inside us, that when we're in the comfort of our life and we're in the familiar or whatever, they don't have an opportunity to come up and out. And we don't get a chance to see them as clearly as we do when we've heard the call to adventure, but we're also flooded with all those more negative emotions that are the self-doubt, the fear, why me, why now, can I just avoid this or delay this, or I'll come back to this.
This will be too hard.
This will be too hard, right? Can't it wait a little bit longer? All of those things that we entertain when we think we're not big enough for our own journey. We're not skilled enough for the journey that's calling to us. Right. And what you said is people, often wonder, why did he add this? It is part of that rising action. It's part of the necessary rising tension in the journey. And the tension might appear that it's something outside of us that we have to do, something we have to face. But really the rising tension and the rising action is movement inside us.
Right. And I think as these fears and these doubts and these insecurities arise in this particular stage where we're having all of that tension, and then we're sort of the thoughts and the way we're talking to ourselves in this phase is, I can't, I won't, I don't have the skills, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the abilities to move forward, right? It forces us to face ourselves. It forces us to acknowledge, wow, in the acknowledging what I don't think I have, this is kind of deep, but I'm actually realizing what it is I need.
Wow.
And if I can realize what it is I need in the understanding of what I don't have, I'm giving myself chills. Then I start to realize if I now know what I need, now I can find it within myself to move forward. So, so kind of having these rising insecurities and these fears and these doubts also has a purpose in our own humanness. Right? So you sort of alluded to that, we've got light and shadow. We've got strengths and weaknesses. We've got all of these things inside of us. And this particular phase, this refusal of the call, is sort of, it's kind of shining the spotlight on maybe the side of ourselves that can be so critical and consumed by self-doubt. But if we could just look at this phase as an opportunity to feel the tension, to face our fears, to accept our humanness, we then may be able to move forward into the next phase.
Because we won't be fully available to the next phase until we meet this particular challenge in the journey. We have to see the shadow. We have to see those doubts and those insecurities that you described, right? And it is part of creating a movement. And something, I don't know if we would have talked about this, but that sense of stagnancy in the familiarity, right, it's one thing to get to a place if you're enjoying your life, if things are as they are meant to be and you are growing. But a lot of people get in these familiar grooves. We get in these well-worn pathways. We get in our boxes and we actually like our boxes. And then we want to stay there. And so there is this, it's kind of a shaking up inside us that's important, that does happen, that flushes this stuff to the surface, that we could say, but I was just fine yesterday before this thing came into my life, before I heard this invitation to a journey, right? Why do I have to do this? I really liked my old life. I want to get back to normal. Right. And what we realize, and what many people have lost the language, and I think Joseph Campbell and all of his work was trying to give us more of the symbology of this language, that this is a universal story. We all have the hero's journey going on in our very own lives, whether we know this or not. And part of our journey sometimes as human beings are being these creatures of habit, creatures of comfort, right? We like our creature comforts. We like to know what the normal is. We like to live the expected, right? We like to live what we know. And this whole journey is about uncovering and discovering inside ourselves who we really are and the bigger skills that we have. But we can't get to those bigger phases, and we can't live that bigger picture vision for our life when we're playing small. And this refusal of the call creates an interesting kind of tension. Like you said, it's a 180, but it's a twisting. It like turns it on its head a little bit because, everybody meets the initial invitations differently. Some people are excited about the adventure. Some people are reluctant for the adventure. But regardless, we're going to face this refusal of the call that creates its own unique tension. It's a unique tension because you're facing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, I have the most perfect example of this in my own personal life, which really illustrates, we talked about this a little bit probably in previous podcasts, but I'm just feeling it so strongly. The refusal of the call phase was my decision to retire from the federal government. So briefly, a 22-year career with the federal government had me in a very comfortable place in my life. Working for the federal government was, talk about a box. It was very safe. It was very comfortable. I had salary I could count on. I had a place to go every day. My day was full of routine and structure, and all the way down to the 30-minute lunch break, right?
Right.
And I could count on all of that. In fact, I could walk through my day probably blindfolded and mute and deaf practically, and still work there and go through that time. And that's a wonderful place to be, especially when you've got children and college tuition and, a household to support and those kinds of things. So it was very comfortable. That was my ordinary world, right?
Well, and I just want to say, for that call to satisfy the need for security, it fills that for you.
Right. And so that was the ordinary world that was comfortable. And about 9 months before I became retirement eligible, that ordinary world began to feel what Joseph Campbell calls uncomfortable. Okay. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrifying. It wasn't something I had to run from immediately, but it began to feel uncomfortable. And that gradual discomfort grew. And I didn't know what kind of options I had to relieve that tension. But eventually we started to talk about the notion of retirement when I was retirement eligible. Now, 9 months prior, I would have easily said I would have worked to age 57 when I was required to retire. But the discomfort grew enough, and that we began to have these conversations about retirement. How could we make that happen? We didn't know. And so I see this refusal of the call as almost the bridge, right? It's the bridge between the ordinary world that we're comfortable in and the new world that we know we would love to step into, the change that we need to face.
Because the refusal of the call requires a conscious choice. That's the bridge. And we're really avoiding the choice. Even if it's the choice to say, I'm going to pull the covers up over my head for a little while longer and see if this invitation will pass over me.
Right?
Right? We can try that. And that is a conscious choice. The refusal of the call, some people say, yeah, no, that's not for me. That's for other people, but it's not for me to do. You might have even had these thoughts where you felt the call, and then I don't even know that it went right to the refusal of the call, but it's like you indulge the thoughts of the scenarios of how
the doubts and the insecurities and the fears. I mean, I'm not gonna lie here. I mean, there were doubts, there were insecurities, there were fears.
Well, but some people even play in the possibilities. Everybody meets this journey differently. Some people are like, it's super exciting because some people are adventurous spirits. So we know that there are people listening who are like, oh yeah, I'm going on that adventure.
Right.
And then there's still a point where the dragon's a little bigger than they thought, or their fire's a little more fiery, whatever it might be. We will all face something that feels bigger than who we are and what we have to bring to that situation. So, but it's a lot more fun when you're the kind of that adventurous spirit. Sometimes people are summoned when they don't want to be part of that. And I'm just saying there's many different ways that we meet that. I think you and I meet that as people who play impossibility. So it is a big deal that we language that something's changing. Something that for 20 some years you had been doing in a well-worn path is feeling different to you. And you first have to feel it. Then you have to, in a way, name it. You have to begin to claim it. Some people might even refuse acknowledging it to themselves that things are changing. There's all different ways that we refuse the call.
Right.
Some people might, like I'm saying, just refuse to admit it to themselves.
Denial.
That change is calling and I'm not answering it. But you did. We did acknowledge at some level when you started to just say, something's not feeling the same. I feel something shifting with some of the things that you did, even some of the great things that you love doing there that wasn't totally part of the routine, but was some of your creativity in your job. Even that was changing. change was happening on a lot of levels, and you were able to articulate that pretty quickly, kind of early on, because you were aware at some level. So I'm saying, but even in your awareness, and we indulged some of the possibilities, like, boy, wouldn't it be fun? Well, what would that look like? We even had some of those conversations of what would it look like if you did retire from that? What would we do next? But inevitably, even after you go those next steps...
Because that's really in the call to adventure phase. You know what you're talking about? Is that call to adventure. Like you have the awareness that a change is a-coming. You have the awareness that you're being pulled forward to consider other options.
You've had a lot of that, and we played in some of that for a little while. And what I'm saying is, though there's this point that happens that even if you are one of those people who are meeting it and willing to play with the possibilities and not just pull the covers up over your head, we did, but there's still a point of like after you play and it's playful, but then it gets serious because the choice point is like, okay, now it's not just time in the dreaming.
Right.
Now I have to make some choices that might really shake up my life.
Right. Exactly.
My life could really change. And so I'm saying for people at all levels of listening, however you're called and however you've met those initial stages of the hero's journey, when you meet the refusal of the call phase, right? When you get to that stage, some point about it is feeling less fun. Some point about it, because that's how the doubts creep in.
Well, that's exactly right. The doubts and the fears and the ambivalence. You
come in your smallness.
It was fun for a little while in that call to adventure stage, right?
Right.
But then, all of a sudden, really the reality of the possibility that you're considering comes in, and all the fears and doubts and insecurities and ambivalence is now in front of you. And how you meet that is really kind of this refusal of the call phase. And initially, a person may say, nope, I've given it all my consideration. I've done my advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons. Nope, I'm not doing that. And the covers go up, right?
Right.
And I think our point here is to help people realize that is to sort of normalize this phase.
Yes.
Not be afraid of this phase. Understand it is a phase.
Have the language for this phase, because we all face it.
Right.
We all face this phase at some point and in some way.
Right.
And that's very empowering. Is it when you have the language, we've said this before in many podcasts, but when you have the language for what's happening to you, you already have a sense of empowerment inside you. And without the language, you doubt that you're even having this experience, and you might just think that you're crazy. What is wrong with me? Who thinks about going in and doing X when Y, which is what you have, is very comfortable?
Right.
Right? Why would you shake things up when you're safe and secure and you have a steady income or you have friends?
But here's a pivotal point on this bridge that I'm talking about, why I consider the refusal to call a bridge. Because in Joseph Campbell's language, and actually even in my own experience, when you're in this phase, you turn your head and you look back at your ordinary world, your well-worn pathways, your comfortable world. And you cannot go back in that direction, okay? And you're in the middle of the bridge, and you can't go back. But then you turn your head to the other direction and you look at the future and the steps it's going to take to move into the next phase on the journey. And you think, holy cow, I can't go that direction either. Right? So the refusal of the call is sort of this phase where he doesn't use this language, but I'm kind of using this kind of paralysis almost, where you look back at your ordinary world and say, okay, I can't go back there for whatever reason. But I also am super afraid to go forward in this direction.
Janice Stanfield is a musician that has a song that's called, Between the No Longer and the Not Yet.
Oh, I love that.
It's a great song because just by the mere invitation, you cannot inhabit your old life anymore.
That's
Even
right.
as much as you try, and the covers that you pull up and the avoidance measures that you take, you can't not know what you now know about yourself, that your life was smaller than you are. right?
Yes.
You can't not know that. But that's the between the no longer, right? The no longer that you can no longer fit in. It's like clothes from 10 years ago that just don't fit you anymore. You can't go back into that world. And yet you're not ready fully for the bigness that you're becoming, but you're en route. And I think it is really important. It is pivotal. I think you use the word, it's like a pivot point in the journey. It definitely is.
Yeah. And I love that between the no longer and the not yet. I mean, that exactly sums up the feeling on the bridge that I was having, you know?
But it's in the moment where you're acknowledging and you're acquiring the language, hopefully through podcasts like this, through Joseph Campbell's work, through, different stories and movies made about his work, right? It's acknowledging that you're in this place. And so you're already on the journey. If you know you've been summoned and you know you're dealing with, at some level, these fears and insecurities and these doubts and all the things that come up, that while you're on that bridge, you are actually in the journey. You didn't leave the journey by having the doubts, which a lot of people think has happened. Like, what's wrong with me? Why me? Why does it have to be me? Why now? All of those thoughts are, as we've said, though, but it's important to say it again. It's a language that you're giving back to yourself, that this is a recognizable part of the process. Of course I would go through this. It's part of we've used some language before, we're going to be using it in the film that we're making, is the incineration process. It's part of the alchemy that happens when you also see the limits of your old language and you're growing into a bigger, broader language that's going to also be part of the bridge that you're walking. And when you have the words, right, that also empowers you to be the creator, that can be calling out the things inside you while you're acknowledging the fear, you're also calling out, like Excalibur sword, you're calling out the tools that you're going to need for the bigger journey that you see ahead. That could be daunting. It might be fun, but many times in the hero's journey, it can be a reluctant, conscious choice to say, I can't go back. I have to go forward. And even that is incredibly empowering if you have the eyes and the language to articulate it and to see it.
Yes.
Very powerful.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think we nailed it there.
Right?
the energy behind this phase.
You didn't leave the journey.
No.
You are really deeper in it now because you're hearing you're feeling that call to almost refuse and avoid the journey. And you're knowing that this is a big pivot point for you.
Right.
It's a matter of how are you going to pivot?
Right.
Not will you pivot?
Right.
You are pivoting.
Right.
You are changing at this point. Now the next question is how will you meet that challenge and all those shadow elements coming up inside you, right? What will this phase look like for you?
And I think it's important here to, for our listeners to just give some brief examples. I obviously gave a big example with respect to this decision about retirement. This can relate to, remember earlier I talked about sort of micro issues or micro problems or micro challenges and macro. So this can mean the journey of your life, or this could mean different phases. This could be different sort of mini journeys in your life. I mean, it could be, do I buy a new car? Do I sell this house and downsize? Do I have another child? Do I get out of my marriage? Do I step into a marriage, right? I mean, these are all big life decisions that are all part of the hero's journey. If we could tap into our own hero within, we would feel so much more empowered in these decisions.
Right.
And it's this is my language, but I believe we sort of have an epidemic on our planet of a lack of sort of empowerment and responsibility within the self. And we're not going to talk about sort of why that is on this podcast today. But I think again, you and I are all about teaching people, guiding people, helping people tap into their own hero.
Well, and that's so important, tapping into their own hero, because when you're in your hero's journey, and you're taking the steps in that journey, you might be hearing a lot of other people's voices, giving you all kinds of feedback on your journey, solicited or unsolicited.
Right.
But then you have to remember, who's the hero of this story?
Who's
it's
the
you.
hero of your story, right?
Of your story,
Right.
It's you.
Right.
And so there's something also with this refusal of the call that gets really clear. What are the voices inside you that are even beyond the voices that you're hearing of everybody else?
Right.
But at first, everybody else's voices may be influencing more of your self-doubt and insecurities. But there's something that happens that you know your strength comes from within, right? There's strength in refusing the call. But there's strength in acknowledging that you're feeling like you want to refuse the call, but you're going to find the courage and the grounding and the skills and the tools anyway to go forward because you are the only one living this journey. And so part of that refusal of the call, they don't talk about this, but I think is also a recognition of whose voices are in my head. Whose voice am I listening to? Is it my mother? Is it my father? Is it my uncle, my cousin, my brother? Who is it? Is it a teacher in school that told me I'll never be able to do these things? You know, from Nemo, I bring that up, right? You can't do these things, Nemo, right?
Right.
And
another good example of the hero's journey, right? Is Finding Nemo.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, right? Marlin is,
Right.
You think the character is Nemo, but he actually has the courage. I mean, he has the unfortunate incident of getting scooped up and being taken on a journey, but Marlin has to choose what to do and face his fear, the big, great, big, wide ocean,
Right.
that there's, countless unknowns out there.
Right.
Right. And he has to face himself and all of that stuff comes up in him. Right. And when he's saying you just can't do these things, Nemo, really, while it might have been messages from other people, it's a belief system he now has inside himself that he has to face, that you just can't do these things, Marlin.
Right.
They don't say that, but that's who you meet in the refusal of the call.
Yes.
And in fact, that's what we're transmuting to say, of course I can do these things, and I will do all these things and more.
And I also think, great example, and I also think that it's important here to also say that some people may look at the fears and the doubts and the insecurities that do rise. Part of what we tell ourselves is that these might be signs that it's not the right choice to move forward, right? And I need to listen to that and pull the covers over my head or find an excuse why I can't go on my adventure, right? But really, again, you and I are the voice to say, no. This is part of the process. This is part of the journey. Face those fears. Face those insecurities.
Well, and if change is meant for you, you'll see the invitations come in many ways. So when you were summoned to your retirement as an example, that was the call, was to a life change. It wasn't summoned to retirement. It was a call to change and expansion.
Yes.
But it manifested through a decision to retire and to move into a new chapter of your life. And so if change is meant for you, it's going to find you, right? And you may think you can avoid it, but there is no avoiding this call to something bigger. And it's just learning to recognize the signs. So if you turn away from it, because some people do actually try and turn away from it, and they put a lot of energy and effort into turning away from this thing that is calling them, notice the signs. They'll keep knocking on your door and they're going to get in one way or another. Not that it's stalking you and chasing you, but it is for you. And it is yours to do. And the sooner we can recognize this and claim this language again, this is why souls come here. We come here to grow. We come to go through these changes, these expansions, the exciting times and the lower points as well. And, and we know that we're going to have conversations with fear. We know we're going to have conversations with doubt. We know we're going to have conversations with all the different voices in our head, and all the conditioning we've had as children and growing up wherever we have and the life experiences we've had. That's all going to come into play here. And then part of what happens, and again, I don't know if Joseph Campbell really highlights this, but as the hero continues in the journey, and there are many more stages, he or she begins to really hear more and more clearly their own voice, their own soul, like their own skills inside. And that becomes paramount as one of the most important tools in the journey. And this refusal of the call is to spotlight, all the static and all the other radio waves and stations and communications we have going on inside us, so that if we're going to be dealing with fear, we might as well be dealing with our own instead of everybody else's, right? And I think this is another way that the journey helps us get clear on what are the dragons we're really facing.
Right.
And we think they're out there, and sometimes they are out there, but most often, if not, most of the time, they're inside us. They're our own inner dragons, right? That we need to meet and address. And learning the language of the signs, learning the language of language, learning the importance of getting clear on our own inner voice and our own inner guidance system is part of this process. And what will feel painful is the burning away of voices that are not ours.
That is profound.
Right? And that can be so uncomfortable because we're so used to those voices
any
harassing
fire is
us.
uncomfortable.
I mean, right? But the heat of that experience is really important, because a lot of people, in the weight that we carry in our lives and the stress and the overwhelm that we've been, and this is why the hero's journey calls us, because it says that weight and those burdens aren't really for you. You're meant to be getting lighter so you can become bigger. Right?
Yes.
And so it's really profound to start to recognize what voices do I need to be letting go of. And those dynamics with those people in your life will begin to change.
Right.
Because that's not the most important voice. It's yours. It's your communication system. And yes, after you start to tease out which voice is mine and which isn't, right? You also have to look at, and then what's the quality of that voice? What's the quality of that inner messaging system? And if it's your voice and it's still a whole lot of fear, you have to unpack some of that in this hero's journey. And part of trying to refuse the call, right, is getting much clearer on how you talk to yourself, what the belief systems are inside yourself. And this does form a core bridge. You will revisit potentially in the hero's journey another stage and phase of refusing the call, because it's not once and done.
Right.
We've said this before.
Yes.
Often it spirals. So you get through a refusal of the call, and then you feel like you're making some progress, and another one comes and finds you. But now you recognize it and you reflect on, well, how did I do it last time? What were the things that were holding me back the last time? Well, I'm free from those tethers, but wait, there's more, right? Oh, but wait, there's more. There's always new things to grow inside us, to go deeper in our faith, deeper in our courage, and deeper in these skills. And I think it's important, I can't say it enough, that the language and the recognizing of the signs and becoming more familiar, that this path may be new to me, but it's well worn by many other heroes and travelers in the journey. And I can take strength from that and collect the signs and gather the language and start talking to myself in a different way that is more empowering. Yes, you're afraid of this. Yes, maybe XYZ circumstances didn't work out for me before, but I didn't have this language. I wasn't as prepared then as I am now. You start to talk to yourself in a more empowered way, and that the old language isn't stopping you. The new language begins to empower you, and you use the gift of language to help you move through the stages as well. And you can say to yourself, I am a conscious creator. I might be scared. I might have some fear, but I am on a journey, and I'm remembering who I am and more of my power. And just being willing to see yourself in a new light helps you begin to cut away some of the tethers that are holding you back to that small life, that you're still looking back almost as if to say, I'm just beginning the journey. I could turn back, right? That's part of the refusal of the call. We entertain thoughts that I can go back, right? I'm only a mile into the journey. That's not that far. But we realize that we can't. Either the bridge is broken, that we've already crossed, whatever that might be. And we start to allow ourselves some power and some, fortification in the journey to realize, well, I've gotten this far. That life is too small. I can't go back to what I was. I might be scared of what the future holds, but maybe I'll transform fear into some kind of faith, and I'm finding some new steps and footholds, and I'm going to allow myself to not know where I'm going, but I'm going to know that as I'm moving, I'm in the journey and I'm living what I'm meant to live to grow the way I need to grow, and I'm going to trust that. It's very powerful.
Very powerful. Thank you for that.
It's very powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I know I was just talking for a minute. I know you probably have more to share as we round this out today, but I just wanted to bring our attention to another story of a hero's journey that's illustrated in a Disney film, The Lion King. Many of our listeners might be familiar with that, Mufasa was the Lion King and the father of Simba, who's the little lion cub. And they clearly have like a beautiful relationship. They're very connected, and the mother, can't remember the mother's name, but anyway, they're this family and this whole tribe, this pride of lions, and Simba's father's the leader of the whole pride, and really the leader of the whole animal kingdom kind of bows to Mufasa.
Right.
And a series of unfortunate events happen, and Mufasa is killed, if many people remember. And the uncle, who has always been sort of manipulating and has had his eyes on the throne, because he would have been the brother of the Lion King. Scar, right? Just think of that name right there. And, he has hands in his brother's demise, but you don't know that. And he plants the seed in Simba that it was all his fault that his father dies. And Simba is so ashamed of himself as a little cub without the skills to know whether that voice in his head from Scar is his or not. He ingests the whole thing as if the whole thing is my fault, and he runs away. Right? He runs away.
Right.
And they all think that Simba is dead, that he passed too.
Right.
And Scar happily, greedily, takes over the throne and changes the whole dynamics of the pride and, the experience of all of those beings in that pride. Meanwhile, Simba's not dead. He is alive, but he's almost the living dead for a little while. He's got so much shame inside himself. He can't, he almost can't even imagine living. And so he struggles, but he finds some, a little cast of characters that have a sense of humor, and they get him laughing, and he grows up a little bit more. And then one day, in desperation, one of the Pride members, they're out of food because of what's happened in Simba's absence. It's a whole little summary of the Lion King movie, but it's important to build the tension for the moment of the refusal of the call. His childhood friend, Nala, I think her name is, comes to find Simba, or comes to find food, but in looking for food to help her family, she finds Simba. And she's shocked because he's not dead. He's very alive, and he's the rightful king. And so she wakes up immediately to the fact that he needs to come back and restore the throne, and to throw Scar off the throne, who's like devastated their pride and has nearly ruined the animal kingdom in the absence of a true leader. Well, Simba is still back in the Dark Ages with himself and feels that he doesn't deserve the throne, or he's not the leader they're looking for because he's fully responsible for his father's death, and he's still carrying all that weight. And she says to him, well, of course you're going to come back with me. And he's just like, basically, no, I'm not the lion you're looking for. I'm not who you think I am. But the truth is, he is who she thinks he is, and more, but he can't see it in that low, low moment.
All the self-doubt.
All the
personal
self-doubt.
Insecurity.
He's taken all the responsibility for something.
Well,
that his uncle gave him the responsibility. Right. So he had somebody very influential telling him that it was his responsibility.
Right.
And then that compounded his own belief system that, yeah, I did that thing.
Yeah.
When he was this little innocent lion cub doing what little lion cubs do, an unfortunate series of events happened. And you can see how we can take on these beliefs that maybe aren't even true about ourselves,
right,
like he did. And then there is the call coming in from Nala to say, well, I found you now. You're going to come back with me and we're going to set things right.
Right.
And he makes a conscious choice to say, yeah, I'm not coming. That's very clearly the refusal of the call.
Right.
And it's important for people, when you take the time to give the summary of the story, I think it's a very great illustration of this, but without the context, him saying I'm not coming doesn't mean anything. But when you have all the, the understanding of who he really is, what
Right.
really happened, the false beliefs he took on inside himself, the box he put himself in, and the low vibrational or energetic point he's feeling himself to be, that's who he really is.
Right.
All of that is just not true, but it's all that he can see right now. So he is this like disempowered hero, right? This
Right.
hidden hero, hidden from himself, that when the call comes in, he's like, yeah, I can't possibly meet that invitation.
Right.
I'm not the one you're looking for. But then a series of events happen. She goes back, right? And then a series of events happen, and he meets one of the masters that was kind of a guide for his father, I think, who finds him and reminds him of who he is.
Which is the next.
Oh my
So it's
goodness.
it's a nice segue, or it's kind of a nice place to round us out, because the next thing we'll probably be talking about is the next phase in the hero's journey, which is meeting the mentor.
Well,
right?
then there it
Which
lines
is what
up perfectly.
Rafiki, right? That's who you're
Rafiki.
referring to. Rafiki the monkey is who he meets. So he's refused, he's denied, he said, no way, that's not me, I can't possibly, I don't have the
Right.
skills, I don't have the strength, I'm not my father, all of the things he said to himself. And then, boom, he meets Rafiki the mentor, who says, oh, no, wait a minute here. Let us remember who you are. And he empowers him
Right.
to remember who he truly is inside of himself.
Right? But on that precipice and on that bridge of making this critical decision, from having refused the call to making that pivot to knowing I'm the only one to accept the call because this is my journey.
Right.
Right? And if I'm the hero of the story, I'm the one that needs to say yes to it.
Right.
And so, yes, perhaps we'll explore a little bit more of Rafiki and the idea of the mentor and the intervention that comes in often in the journey. Universally, the universe sends basically these teachers, these mentors in these critical moments in ways that you yourself might not say, well, I didn't call that person in, and yet they appear. Like when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Right.
And that's also part of what happens here. So
Right.
I just thought that was a very, perfect illustration
Yeah.
of a refusal of the call.
Yeah.
Because he literally says, I'm not the one.
Right.
Right. And we can all take that to heart. We can all feel moments where we've been called to do something. Some things are not ours to do, and we'll know they're not ours to do because when we do say, I'm letting this pass on by, I'm not going to engage with that, it doesn't come back for you.
Right.
The ones that do are meant for you.
Yes. Big point.
Right? The
Yep.
ones that do are meant for
So
you.
pay attention to your life, right? Wake up.
Right?
Be an alert driver through your life.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And be looking through that windshield
Right.
and having an awareness that that's where your empowerment is coming from.
Right.
It's not from your past. It's in the choices that you make now. It's in the awareness you have today to be able to even see that you're in a journey.
Right.
Right? Many people are just doing life instead of living life. Right? And consciously choosing and creating their life. And this is part, I just have to say it, Lacy, this is part of the great awakening happening on this planet at this time, is that more people are waking up to realize they are the driver, they are the author of their lives, and they are going to go through, they are going to meet this refusal of the call moment, they're going to go through all the fears and self-doubts, and it is a very normal part of the journey. It is just part of the growth process. And so when we see those things appear in our life, instead of feeling devastated or disappointed or getting into all the self-judgment, if we have the lenses to see it, we could say, oh, I recognize where I am. This is the hall of the refusal of the call.
Or the bridge.
Right? This is the bridge of the refusal of the call. And this is where many great heroes who've gone on to do many great things, they have stood where I'm standing right now. And I have the power of all of those heroes. I have all that archetypal power. I have all the literal power of people we have seen do great things from great adversity. And you are going to be that very hero who is summoning in that level of courage and faith. And you are going to transmute that fear. And this is a time on the planet in this great awakening is to transmute any lower fears that we have inside us, to first get the voices inside us to at least be our own, right? That's a helpful first step. And then when you're dealing with you in that space, that's where your power is, because you can change you. You can't change others' voices and perspectives and opinions and judgments, but you can change yours. And this is a critical point also that empowers that new hero in the journey. They're still very green in this part of the journey, but they're also being opened up and activated to the great awakening and this rising hero's journey inside themselves. So it's a very powerful conversation. It's a very poignant conversation for these times.
Yes.
So much change is going on the planet, and not just globally out there, but in our everyday lives. Everybody is having to face change in their lives in 2020, 2021. I think we are in a pivot point, and will humanity answer the call, or will humanity refuse the call on a bigger scale? We're watching that. Those who are awake in the journey are seeing this unfold.
Yes.
So the choice is ours, and it's a very exciting choice point. And there are many other tools in the journey that we will cover in more Fireside Chats to come. June sort of swept by in kind of a quantum acceleration of time, and we're not sure what happened. So we wanted to make sure we brought some big inspiration in this June-July hybridized podcast today. And we want to thank all of our listeners for joining us. I want to thank you, Lacy, for joining me today.
Absolutely. And thank you, Marie. It was awesome.
Yes, very powerful insights. And I want to just invite people to continue to find our inspirations on many social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. I'll put the links to a lot of that below this video. And I also want to invite you to sign up on our website to, if you opt in to give us your email, you'll get a notification of the newsletter that we've activated again, and we have a guest writer who's amazing. We're going to be having more and more voices enter this conversation with us. Like many people, we've been adjusting to all the impacts of COVID, but there's still an incredibly big vision for Whole Soul School and Foundation, and there are many people who are ready and willing and desiring to participate in more of these conversations and more different kinds of podcasts and writings and all kinds of things. So join us there on our website. And please, if you feel called, there's a very nice donate button on the website. And if you click that, it'll take you directly into a little donation portal. And you can give one time, or you can be a sustainer donor, which really helps us grow this mission and this vision. And so we thank all of you for giving us your time, your attention, and even your resources and the donations that we do receive. Every single donor and donation is deeply appreciated. So until next time, just carry this awareness of the refusal of the call. Continue to stay awake and aware in your rising hero's journey, because you're on one.
That's right. That's right. And we're here to help guide and support that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So until next time, blessings, everyone.